I am Maya, an elementary school teacher who is approaching retirement age. There is one story I often tell my students to teach them a lesson about being cautious. It is a story about something that happened to me when I was in elementary school. At that time, my family, my parents, my older sister, and me, lived in an old-style house in the suburbs of Oregon. The house was built back in the 60s, and it had a very unusual feature that you rarely see now: a small milk delivery slot right next to the front door. My family didn't use the slot anymore, but we didn't plan to remove it either. My dad said it was a sentimental memory from his own childhood. Back then, my family used a regular mechanical lock. Everyone had their own key. But then, one day, my older sister, who was in middle school at the time, lost her key on the way home from school. She was afraid our parents would get mad, so she didn't dare confess. Instead, she pulled me into her plan to hide it. She told me we would keep the key in a secret spot to share. She promised it was only temporary, until she figured out a way to resolve it without our parents finding out. She told me not to tell anyone, ever. I always agreed to whatever she wanted. We were very close and loved each other. And the secret spot she chose was that unused milk slot. The agreement was simple. Whenever no one was home, the last person to leave would slide the key through the slot, letting it fall onto the floor behind the shoe cabinet placed next to the door inside. When returning home, the other person just needed to open the outer flap of the slot, reach their hand in, grab the key, and open the door as usual. This system worked smoothly for almost a week. Everything seemed fine, until that Wednesday afternoon, when I asked to skip my piano lesson because I had a headache. It was around 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and definitely no one else was home yet. When I got home, I did everything as usual. I opened the milk slot flap, reached my hand in, took the key, and opened the door. After going inside, I took a pain reliever, planning to lie down for a while on the living room sofa. But right at that moment, I heard a noise coming from the front door. The scratching sound continued. It sounded like someone was fumbling around on the floor, lightly scratching the wood. I walked closer, intending to call my sister's name and open the door for her. But immediately, my throat tightened. Through the small gap created by the shoe cabinet, I saw an arm reaching in through the milk slot. It was a large arm wearing a black glove, and it definitely wasn't my sister's. It was fumbling around under the shoe cabinet, searching for something. I stood frozen in the hallway, my heart pounding loudly. The arm kept reaching and groping. The black-gloved fingers lightly tapped the wood floor, feeling every crack and gap. I knew he was looking for the key. I suddenly remembered that when I came in, I had casually put the key in my own pocket instead of leaving it in the spot. I felt incredibly lucky. All I could do was stand there, staring at the searching arm in suffocating silence. I didn't dare move. I was afraid that if I made any noise, he would know someone was inside and break down the door to rush in. My headache doubled in intensity. My pulse was throbbing in my temples, but I didn't dare breathe heavily or move an inch. After a while, the arm retreated. I heard heavy footsteps moving off the porch, but I still didn't dare move. I was afraid it was just a trick, that he might still be standing there, waiting. I didn't dare go into the bedroom to rest. I sat in the living room instead, fixating on the milk slot. Much later, nothing else unusual happened, and I fell asleep due to exhaustion and the side effects of the medicine. I woke up when I heard my sister calling at the door. I jumped up, rushed to open the door, cried, and told her everything. After hearing the story, she slumped down onto the floor, her face pale. That very day, she confessed everything to our parents: losing the key, hiding it in the milk slot, and the terrifying incident I had just experienced. My parents didn't scold her. They just hugged us tightly, their faces ashen with fear at the thought of what could have happened. The next morning, my dad immediately sealed the milk slot with a thick metal plate and called a locksmith to replace the entire front door lock. From then on, we used a modern keyless entry system. My mom called the police. An officer came to take our statement and told us that the neighborhood was experiencing a series of similar petty burglaries at the time. The thieves knew that many families had a habit of hiding a spare key in places like under the doormat, in a plant pot, or in a mail or milk slot. They went door to door to try their luck. Our house was just one of them. If he had found the key, the consequences could have been very serious. After all these years, I still get chills. If I hadn't come home earlier, the key might have been in his hand. If I had left the key in the slot as usual, instead of putting it in my pocket, he could have opened the door and entered the house while I was sleeping soundly. I don't dare imagine what would have happened then. My sister regretted the whole thing deeply. She apologized to me many times and became much more cautious about everything. She also never hid anything from our parents again. As for me, after becoming a teacher, I often recount this story to my students. Seemingly harmless habits can create danger. And most importantly, do not hide your mistakes out of fear or pride. Confessing and finding a solution is always better than staying silent and facing danger alone. That is the lesson that was deeply etched into me that day. Before we continue, I just want to say thank you. MHS crossed over 10,000 subscribers in 2025, and that's all because of you. Every single view, like, and share means the world to me. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. This year, we're setting our sights on 50,000 in 2026. So if you enjoy these videos and haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. Hit that button, join the community, let's grow this together. Now, back to the stories.
My name is Carlos, and I was only 8 years old at the time. My family lived in a quiet neighborhood in the suburbs of Illinois. It was a chilly autumn evening. My parents had plans to meet some friends for dinner downtown, so I stayed home with my 14-year-old cousin, James, and my 6-year-old sister, Skylar. My parents had already ordered pizza so that we wouldn't have to open the door for anyone. Before they left, they gave us strict instructions. Do not open the door for any reason. If anything happens, call 911 immediately. We were so excited to have a night of freedom. The three of us ate our pizza and then headed down to the basement to play. My dad had turned the basement into a small playroom with a wall-mounted TV, comfy sofas, and a corner for mini hockey. James was an amazing player, while Skylar just swung her stick around and laughed her head off. After our game, we flopped onto the sofa and turned on an action movie. After a while, I got thirsty, so we all went up to the kitchen to get some milk and grab a few snacks. The kitchen was eerily quiet compared to the noise in the basement. We had been hanging out for about 10 or 15 minutes when the doorbell suddenly rang, making us jump. James glanced toward the front door, crept over, and looked through the peephole. His face went pale instantly. I had never seen James look that scared before. He backed away and signaled for us to be absolutely silent. I grabbed Skylar's hand and my heart started racing. Just as we turned to go back to the basement, a loud bang echoed from behind us. It wasn't the front door. It was the kitchen window at the back of the house. James immediately dropped to the floor, trying not to make a sound. He crawled along the floor, staying low behind the kitchen counter until he reached the window where the noise came from. He carefully pulled back a tiny corner of the curtain to look outside. His whole body was stiff with tension. A few seconds later, James crawled back. He looked at me with a dead serious expression and whispered, "Go to the bedroom right now. Lock the door. Do not come out no matter what." I had no idea what James had seen, but I followed his orders immediately. I led Skylar into the bedroom next to the kitchen. She started to cry, so I had to cover her mouth and try to calm her down, even though my own heart was pounding. I peeked through a crack in the door and watched James disappear into the shadows of the hallway. The feeling of being alone made me truly panic. A few minutes later, the bedroom door flew open. James was back, but his face was still tight with stress. I almost cried with relief. "Where did you go?" I whispered. "The doggy door wasn't locked," he said. "I had to go lock it." To explain, we used to have a poodle, but he was staying at our grandparents' house because Skylar was showing signs of an allergy. Before I could ask anything else, a sudden violent pounding started on the front door. We all froze. "Why won't you open up?" "I have a package for you kids," a man's voice shouted from outside. "Open the door, or I'll open it myself." Before we could react, something slammed against the window of the bedroom where we were hiding. Skylar screamed, and James quickly covered her mouth. I grabbed my phone and called my dad. While waiting for the call to connect, James whispered, "I saw a man dressed all in black. He's holding some kind of box and hiding right under the edge of the kitchen window. I couldn't see his face clearly." My dad picked up and told us he was calling the police and coming home right away. He ordered us to stay put and not make a sound. But I didn't listen. Part of it was pure reflex, and part was curiosity because of what James had described. While James was comforting Skylar, I sneakily pulled back the window curtain to see what was outside. Right at that exact moment, the man ripped open the exterior shutters. I was staring right at him. He had cold, pale eyes, a gaunt face that looked like a zombie, and a twisted, distorted smile. I was paralyzed. He whispered through the glass, "I can give it to you if you just open the door." I turned to stone. I was so scared I couldn't even scream. Then, from behind me, James yelled at the top of his lungs, "The police are on their way! You're not getting in here!" The man's expression shifted to a look of pure hatred, but he kept staring at me. Then, he suddenly turned and ran like a madman across the backyard. We heard his heavy footsteps, then a loud thump as he hopped the fence and vanished into the dark alley. Everything went deathly quiet. We didn't dare leave that room until we heard the police sirens out front. A few minutes later, my parents burst through the door, their faces white as sheets. I ran and hugged my mom. My dad held the three of us tight, checking to make sure we were okay. James, being the oldest and the calmest, explained everything to the officers. The police searched the property, shining flashlights across the backyard and the trail leading into the woods. They found nothing except a few large boot prints in the wet mud. The man was never found. Many years have passed, but I can still see those cold, dead eyes. I don't know what package he intended to deliver that night, and I'm glad I'll never have to find out. James's courage saved us that night, and it was the most powerful lesson in staying alert I've ever learned.
My name is Samson. I'm 40 years old now, living a quiet life in the suburbs of Phoenix with my wife and 2 kids. To most people, I look like a stable, middle-aged guy who is maybe a little too obsessed with double-checking the door locks every night. They don't know that my caution was earned during a terrifying night 6 years ago, a night that put an end to my reckless youth. It was 2020. I drove my RV out to a desolate forest near Williams, Arizona. It's a massive area filled with towering ponderosa pines. I had camped alone many times before, but this time felt different. There was a heavy, suffocating feeling in the air that I couldn't explain. I sat by a small campfire, sipping a beer and listening to the wind whistle through the trees. Around 11 p.m., I packed everything up, locked myself inside the RV, and crawled into my sleeping bag. I fell asleep quickly, but I was suddenly jolted awake by a woman's blood-curdling scream echoing through the woods.
Please help me. Someone help me.
I bolted upright. The scream happened again, but this time it sounded weaker. I threw on a jacket and grabbed my camera and a flashlight. I decided to record everything because if something went wrong, I wanted to have evidence. When I stepped out of the RV, the biting night air cleared my head instantly. I swept my flashlight around the campsite. "Is anyone there?" I called out. No one answered. I walked slowly toward the direction of the sound. The thick trees looked like giant ghosts under my flashlight beam. Every step I took on the dry pine needles made a loud crunching noise. I pushed deeper into the woods, keeping my eyes locked on the darkness ahead. Then, out of nowhere, I saw a man. He was standing in a cluster of pines quite a distance away. He wasn't moving at all. "Hey, did you hear that screaming?" I shouted. He didn't say a word. He just stood there like a statue. Then, everything happened too fast. Bang! A gunshot ripped through the night. I didn't know where the bullet was aimed, but the heat and the deafening sound were so close that my survival instinct took over. Pure panic set in. I turned and ran for my life back toward the RV. I lunged inside, slammed every lock I could find, and collapsed on the floor, gasping for air. A heavy, terrifying silence filled the vehicle. I turned off all the lights, gripped a hunting knife, and held my breath to listen. Then, the noises started. At first, it was just footsteps circling the RV. I stood frozen, my hand tight around the knife handle, staring at the front door. But then I heard a metallic creaking sound coming from underneath the floor, right where the storage bay was. My RV had a large storage compartment built into the belly of the vehicle. It could be opened from the outside with a metal latch. I stood there, paralyzed with fear. He was right underneath me, separated only by a thin, hollow floorboard. If he managed to pry that bay open from the outside, one hard kick would break through the floor. The thought made me want to scream. The creaking continued, as if he were testing different angles. I could hear his heavy, ragged breathing. I squeezed the knife until my knuckles turned white. I didn't know what to do. Should I start the engine and floor it? But he was right under the wheels. I needed to call the police, but there was no signal. This part of the forest was way too remote. Suddenly, the noise stopped. There was a long, agonizing silence. I strained my ears to hear anything. Then, the whole RV suddenly rocked. He was shoving the storage bay door upward with all his might, trying to create enough of a gap to crawl through. I backed away toward the rear of the van, the knife shaking in my hand. And then, a miracle happened. The RV's anti-theft alarm went off. I don't even remember turning it on, but it started blaring. The high-pitched, ear-piercing siren screamed through the forest. The signal light started flashing over and over. The banging under the floor stopped instantly. I heard footsteps sprinting away, fast and frantic. He was running. I stood there, trembling uncontrollably, while the alarm continued to wail. It took me several minutes to gather enough courage to turn the system off. When the silence returned, I still didn't dare open the door. I waited until the sun came up, started the engine, and drove straight out of the forest. I didn't stop until I reached a crowded area where I finally felt safe. When I got home, I watched the footage on my camera hundreds of times. In the blurry light and the shaking of my flight, the man was just a dark shadow. No face, no name. Was the woman's scream real, or was it just a trap to lure me out of the van? I'll never know. That night changed me forever. I never go camping alone anymore. I gave up the solitary wandering and the thrill of danger that I used to love. At 40, I choose a quiet life with my family. The safety I used to find boring is now the thing I cherish most.
The leaves were turning, those golden colors of fall, and they were drifting down into our backyard. I looked out the window and saw Jordan playing by himself in the treehouse. I'm a carpenter, and that treehouse was my gift to my boy for his 8th birthday. I really put my heart into it. Solid wood floors, real windows, even a little staircase instead of the usual rope ladder. Seeing the pure joy on Jordan's face the first time he climbed up there, I knew it was all worth it. My wife, Lisa, was making dinner. She called out for Jordan, but he didn't answer. I went out to the backyard and looked up at the treehouse. Jordan, dinner time. I'm playing with Sam. Sam was this imaginary friend Jordan had told us about a few weeks ago. We didn't think much of it. All kids have imaginary friends, right? But I had noticed that since the treehouse, Sam seemed to be around more often. Sam can come back tomorrow, buddy. It's time to eat now, I said. Jordan climbed down, and I noticed his clothes were dirtier than usual. Lisa and I were pretty relaxed about letting him play and explore, so it wasn't a big deal. During dinner, Jordan talked nonstop about Sam, how his friend knew everything about the woods and animals, could copy bird calls perfectly, and had tons of stories about living in the forest. "What were you and Sam doing in the treehouse?" Lisa asked, giving me a little smile. "We were drawing. Sam likes to draw, and he's teaching me about the animals in the forest." I nodded at Lisa. Kids have such vivid imaginations. The next day, while Jordan was at school, I climbed up to the treehouse to fix a loose board. I stopped short when I saw the drawings hanging on the walls that Jordan had mentioned. But they weren't like normal 8-year-old drawings. These were pictures of forest animals, but they were all dissected, with their insides drawn really accurately and in detail. Some had scribbled writing on them, not Jordan's handwriting. There was no way Jordan could draw stuff like this. In the corner of the treehouse was a pile of candy wrappers and leftover food. It wasn't weird for Jordan to take snacks up there, but I didn't remember buying him those kinds of cookies and that brand of candy. I picked up a piece of the cookie. It smelled damp and musty, like it had been there for days, and there were these small, dried mud footprints, smaller than Jordan's, and a pair of tattered shoes shoved in the corner, way too small for my son. I left everything as it was and went back inside. "Did Jordan mention having a friend over to play?" I asked Lisa when she got home. "No, why?" I told her what I'd seen, and Lisa just shook her head, confused. "Maybe a kid from the neighborhood snuck in when we weren't looking," she suggested. That night, I asked Jordan about having friends over. Only Sam. "Sam, your imaginary friend?" "No. Sam is a magic boy who lives in the woods. Sam knows how to live with the animals, and he teaches me lots of things." I looked at Jordan closely, trying to see if he was making it up, but his eyes were serious. "Sam hurt me." "What? When?" "Yesterday. I didn't want to do what Sam said, so Sam hit me." Jordan pulled up his sleeve, showing a bruise on his arm. That night, Lisa and I stayed up late, whispering and talking. Someone was meeting our son, hiding in the treehouse I had built. The thought scared and angered me at the same time. The next day, I pretended to go to work, but I actually turned back and parked down a side street near our house. I snuck in through the side gate and sat by the window overlooking the backyard, watching the treehouse. Nothing happened all morning, but around lunchtime, I saw a small figure appear in the treehouse window. It wasn't Jordan. He was at school. I crept outside, trying not to make a sound. As I got closer, a child climbed down the treehouse ladder, a skinny kid with long. "Hey, stop!" The kid turned around, then he jumped down the last few steps, ran incredibly fast, and disappeared into the woods before I could catch him. I rushed inside and called the police. They arrived quickly, and I described what I had seen. One officer looked at me with a doubtful expression, but the others checked the treehouse and found the evidence. The disturbing drawings, the small shoes. Could be a homeless child. "We've had reports of missing kids in the area over the years," one officer said. "They organized a search of the woods, but they didn't find anything. When Jordan got home from school, we had to explain why the police were at our house. We tried to stay calm as we asked him about Sam. What did Sam tell you about his family?" "Sam said his mom and dad took him into the woods and never came back." Lisa and I exchanged horrified glances. After that, everything felt like a nightmare. Interviews with the police, psychologists talking to Jordan, searches that turned up nothing but a cave with some animal bones neatly arranged. No sign of Sam, We took down the treehouse despite Jordan's strong reaction. I had unknowingly created a hiding place for something unknown. Tonight, I look out the window into the darkness of the woods behind our house. Jordan still talks about Sam. He says Sam promised he'd come back, but I'll never let that happen. I double-check the locks on the doors, leaving the backyard lights on, and I lie awake, listening to the sounds in the dark, wondering if Sam was really just a lost child or something else entirely. I've always loved traveling solo. Just me, my old Jeep, and Bella, my little beagle. Freedom's everything. No strict plans, no waiting on anyone, no rigid schedule. This time, we were headed to a small town in Northern California. I found a cozy wooden house on Airbnb. The price was decent, not too far from town, and it had a huge yard for Bella to run around. Pretty much perfect. As soon as I got there, I felt this warm, homey vibe. The place had a simple, classic style. Soft, yellow light from old-school bulbs made it feel comfy and familiar. What caught my eye were the photos. On the walls, the bookshelves, even above the fireplace. Snapshots of people who had lived here before, posing with their pets. I smiled, felt like I'd just walked into a house full of animal lovers. I unhooked Bella's leash, and she was off in a flash, nose to the ground, tail going a mile a minute. Her little paws tapped excitedly on the wooden floor. I laughed, dropped my bag, and started pulling out some of the stuff I brought. Then I heard a noise. Turned around, Bella had something in her mouth. I frowned and walked over. A bone. Where the heck did that come from? I muttered, glancing around. Probably a chicken or beef bone, a voice said behind me. I jumped and spun around. There was a guy leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed. Tall, kind of messy brown hair, gray eyes that were hard to read. Hi, I'm Tyler, the owner. I usually stop by to say hey to guests on their first day, he said with a shrug. I held Bella, feeling a little weird about the whole thing. But he seemed casual, like this was totally normal. I cleaned the place pretty often, but maybe it got left behind by the last guests. Zrania, he said, holding up the bone Bella had found. I put Bella down. She stared at him for a second, then let out a tiny bark. He just smiled and told me to call if I needed anything, then headed out. Everything went on as usual. That evening, I curled up on the sofa with Bella and put on a movie. The fire crackled in the fireplace, filling the room with a cozy warmth. Bella snuggled up next to me, eyes half closed. Then, out of nowhere, she shot up. Ears perked, eyes locked on something behind her. I turned my head slowly, and there was a figure. I screamed. The person immediately threw up their hands like they were trying to calm me down. It's me, Tyler. Just bringing some food for Bella. Saw the light on and figured you were up. I clutched my chest, trying to slow my breathing. He smiled, setting a small paper bag on the table. Just dog biscuits. No big deal. I was a little thrown off. This kind of friendliness felt a bit over the top. Sorry for scaring you. I'm out. I watched him go, feeling a little weird about it, but not overthinking it. Maybe he really was just a nice guy. As night fell, I turned off the lights, curled up with Bella, and let her soft warmth lull me to sleep. Outside, a light breeze rustled through the trees, and the steady hum of insects filled the night. Before long, I drifted off. Somewhere in my half-sleep, I felt something warm, wet, and kind of sad on my fingers. Bella? My eyes fluttered open. She was standing across the room staring at me with this strange look. I sat up, confused. What was up with her? Why was she licking her paw and looking at me like that? She'd just eaten, hadn't she? Over the next few days, that sense of security and comfort I had at first started to fade. Bella kept finding more and more bones, which only made me question the cleanliness of the place even more. On top of that, she was acting weird. Every night, she'd lick my hands and feet, then try to climb on me, making it hard to breathe and jolting me awake. The trip started losing its charm. I finally decided to cut it short and leave 3 days early. Packed up my stuff, planning to get Bella checked out as soon as we got back to the city. But the moment I opened the door, I froze. A tall shadow blocked the exit. I looked up, startled. Tyler. Feeling a little awkward, I mumbled a greeting since I was leaving earlier than planned. He didn't budge, kept throwing out reasons for me to stay. I can give you a discount. You won't find a better place. At first, I turned him down politely, but after a few tries, it hit me. I wasn't going to change his mind. The fake friendliness in his eyes was completely gone. He tilted his head, his smile fading, and his eyes turned cold. I took a slow step back, my hand shaking as I fumbled for my phone in my pocket. He didn't say a word, just stood there, staring. The silence was heavy, pressing in like the air had thickened. I dialed 911. The second he saw, he lunged toward me. I slammed the door shut just in time. A dispatcher's voice crackled through the phone. I blurted out what was happening, gave them my location. The moment I finished, the door crashed open. A vice-like grip clamped around my wrist. "Stay with me a little longer," he whispered, his breath hot against my face, his fingers digging deep into my skin. I always like special guests. Software, warm, sweet. Then, before I could even process it, he leaned in, stuck out his tongue, and slowly dragged it along the back of my hand. My whole body locked up. A wave of pure disgust and terror surged through me. My stomach twisted, a wave of nausea hitting me hard. That wet warmth on my skin, it felt familiar. Could it be him? All those nights I woke up, thinking Bella had licked my hand, but no, it wasn't Bella. A scream tore out of me as I yanked my hand away, using every ounce of strength to shove and punch that sick freak. Bella went wild, barking like crazy. He roared, then slammed his fist into my stomach. Pain exploded through me, my body doubling over on instinct. Everything spun. Light and darkness flickered in and out of my vision. He didn't stop, dragged me toward the kitchen. A sharp clang echoed through the room, metal on metal. In his hand was a knife, pointed straight at me. Terrifying images of what was about to happen shot through me like an electric jolt, freezing me in place. My eyes went wide, locked on the knife in his hand. Then from outside, police sirens, loud, blaring. He jolted, eyes wild with panic, then spun around and bolted. The door crashed open. Heavy footsteps pounded inside. I was safe, sitting in the back of a patrol car while a nurse checked me over. The police searched the house. One of them walked up to me, his face serious. They found bones, a skull, still had part of a scalp attached, blonde hair. I just stared. He was saying something, but all I heard was the ringing in my ears. Human bones. My throat tightened. My mind flashed back to the photos on the walls, past guests, happy pets, bright smiles. Could they have been? He said he wanted to savor me. He wasn't joking. Mark, Danny, and I wanted to do something different for New Year's last year. No more loud cities, flashy fireworks, or packed bars. We were looking for a quiet spot, deep in nature, just snow, pine trees, and a huge night sky. So we booked a cabin on Airbnb, way up in the Montana mountains. We drove up in a pickup truck, tall pines lining both sides of the road, standing still under thick layers of snow. The higher we climbed, the emptier it got, and signs of people started to disappear. By the time we got there, the sun was almost down. The little cabin stood all alone in a sea of white, like something straight out of a winter painting. As soon as I stepped out of the truck, something felt off. The door was unlocked and slightly open. As we slowly pushed the door open, A warm burst of air hit us from the fireplace, with ashes still glowing faintly. Someone had definitely been here before, or maybe the owner left it that way to give us a cozy welcome. We didn't think too much about it, just quickly unpacked our stuff, all hyped up. Night came fast, and we lit up the fireplace, cracked open some beers, turned on some music, enjoyed the grilled meat we had cooked ourselves, and soaked in the peaceful mountain vibes. That little warm cabin in the freezing forest made us feel at ease, and we ended up sharing everything about the past year. Our laughter echoed through the night until we suddenly heard a knock at the door. I got up to check. Standing there was a guy, probably in his 40s, tall but skinny, wearing a dark coat dusted with snow. His face looked worn out, skin pale from the cold, and his deep, dark eyes felt like staring into an empty cave. He stood there quietly for a while, then finally spoke, his voice dry and rough.
"Keep it down, guys. This isn't a place for parties."
After that, he stared at me for what felt like forever, like he was thinking about something, then turned around and left. I watched him walk away, not toward the main road, but straight into the forest, fading into the snowy trees. Silence filled the cabin. None of us said a word, just exchanged confused looks. Mark tried to crack a joke to lighten the mood, but his voice didn't have that easygoing vibe anymore. After a bit, we decided to brush it off and just focus on enjoying our chill time. But weird stuff kept happening. When Mark went out to grab more firewood, he came back looking pale, saying someone was following him. Danny checked the back door and found footprints in the snow all around the cabin. I checked the front door, and the lock definitely looked like someone had messed with it. There are creeps everywhere, as long as they don't mess with us. Who cares? Come on, guys, we're here to party and relax. Mark's good vibes caught on fast, and we let the booze pull us out of our guard. By midnight, that creepy guy was the last thing on our minds. The glass in my hand was empty, then full again, and the countdown to New Year's was about to start. 3, 2, 1. Then out of nowhere, a loud, sharp noise ripped through the moment. The window shattered, glass shards crashing to the floor with a sharp crackling sound. Mark screamed, totally freaked out, and fell to the floor. Danny jumped and dropped his glass, and I clutched my head, covering my ears. 3 more loud bangs echoed through the night, then everything went silent. We slowly looked at each other, completely shaken. Once I realized what was going on, I rushed to pull the curtain back, my hands shaking as I fumbled with my phone to call 911, but the signal kept cutting in and out. It felt hopeless. Then we heard slow, steady footsteps, crunching through the snow, each step hitting us like a punch to the chest. The moment the footsteps faded, the door started rattling. Someone was trying to get in. We called the cabin owner over and over, but no luck. It took almost an hour for the police to finally show up. They looked around and found bullet casings near the cabin, but no footprints, probably covered by the snow. One of the officers gave us a suspicious look. The cabin was a total mess, beer cans and wine bottles everywhere, the 3 of us red-faced, reeking of booze, and looking pretty rough. "Are you sure you heard gunshots? Could have just been fireworks." That question had us looking at each other, kinda unsure now. The police left around 2 a.m. Mark and Danny crashed hard, and I tried to stay up to keep watch, but I knocked out pretty fast too. The next morning, we packed up in a hurry, deciding to leave earlier than planned. While cleaning up, I stumbled on something weird. On the windowsill near the fireplace, there was a crumpled piece of paper with shaky handwriting that said, "I warned you not to disturb me." A chill shot down our spines. This wasn't just in our heads, it wasn't some drunk hallucination. The 3 of us tossed our stuff into the car and got the hell out of Montana. On the way down, We finally reached the cabin owner. I told him everything, but he just laughed and said,
I rent out cabins, not basements.
I was Wade, 8 years old back then, living in a small neighborhood in the suburbs somewhere in the US. It was just me and my mom, just the two of us. Mom always took great care of me, cooked tasty meals, told me bedtime stories every night without fail. Life was simple and peaceful, and honestly, it always made me feel safe. That day, it was one of those scorching hot summer days. I had a fever, so I had to stay home from school. First time ever being home alone. The afternoon sunlight came through the living room window, leaving these cool, shimmering patches of light on the wooden floor. The place was so quiet you could literally hear the clock ticking on the wall. I was feeling kind of worn out, but still pretty chill, just lying on the sofa, flipping through my favorite comic book. And then, out of nowhere, there was a knock at the door. I cracked it open a bit and peeked outside. Standing there was Tim, 6 years older than me and from the same neighborhood. Tim was tall, with these wide, innocent eyes and a soft, easygoing smile. He had some developmental challenges, but he was always the guy who'd help out mowing lawns, grabbing mail from the post office, stuff like that. Tim gave me this warm smile and said he knew I was home alone, so he wanted to help keep watch and make sure I was safe. I didn't know what to say. Tim had never hurt anyone, but knowing he figured out I was home alone made me feel off. I mumbled a quick thanks and told him I was okay. He stood there for a second, still smiling like always, then turned around and walked away. I shut the door and tried to brush off that weird feeling. But when I went back to the sofa, I just couldn't relax the way I did before. A few seconds later, I heard this clanking sound coming from the kitchen. My heart started racing. It wasn't a branch tapping the window or the wind whistling through the door. It sounded more like a drawer being opened. I sat up, holding my breath, eyes locked on the kitchen. Then came another noise, a sharp, metallic clang. By then I knew for sure someone was in the house. My mind went completely blank. First time being home alone, and I had no clue what to do. The only thought running through my head was, get away from this. I took a deep breath, then tiptoed upstairs to my mom's bedroom. The big wardrobe in the corner of the room seemed like the perfect hiding spot. Inside, it was pitch dark, except for a thin sliver of light slipping through the crack of the creaky wooden door. Footsteps echoed on the wooden floor downstairs. Someone was moving around. A few minutes later, the footsteps started climbing the stairs, slow, steady, deliberate. I counted each step, my heart racing faster with every number. When I hit 23, I knew whoever it was had reached the same floor as me. The footsteps kept getting louder, closer. My chest tightened when I heard my mom's bedroom door creak open. Peeking through the crack in the wardrobe, I saw Tim. He was holding a big knife. The familiar, gentle face I knew was gone. Now it looked dull, his eyes wide and restless, like he was desperately searching for something. Tim scanned every corner of the room, eyes darting around, then stopped right in front of my mom's bed. His eyes were wide open, unblinking, wild, empty, like he wasn't really there. This wasn't the Tim I knew. The warm, friendly guy from the neighborhood was gone. What stood there was someone else, cold and terrifying. He started rummaging through everything, then just stood there, frozen in front of the bed. I bit my lip hard, trying not to cry. Bastards. Trash, Tim muttered, his voice raspy and broken, like some kind of witch's curse. He swung the knife around, slashing wildly at the air. The fear inside me hit a breaking point, locking my whole body in place. After what felt like forever, Tim gave up, turned around, headed downstairs, and left. But I still couldn't move. Not yet. I don't remember how long I stayed crammed in that closet. It wasn't until I heard my mom calling me from downstairs that I bolted out and collapsed into her arms, sobbing. The police showed up not long after. I told them everything, every little detail I could remember. They spread out and searched the place, and pretty soon they found Tim sitting on the front steps, still holding the knife. They took him down to the station for questioning, and my mom and I went along too. When Tim saw me, he gave me this big, happy smile. Said he'd spotted a shadowy figure hanging around the house. He thought it was some stranger trying to break in and hurt me. Said he was just trying to protect me by standing guard. And the knife? That was just for self-defense if the guy showed up. The police checked the whole area, but they didn't find anything weird or out of place. Before leaving, they gave my mom a note reminding us to be extra careful, especially since we didn't have a man around the house. And I should have called an adult right away, no matter what. After the police wrapped things up, Tim turned to me with this big, bright smile. But the way he talked and the way he acted before, it didn't match. And in that moment, looking into his eyes, it hit me. This was the real Tim, the version I never even thought could exist. Only now, as an adult, do I realize it. That whole thing with Tim still sticks with me. Makes me wonder if I was just too naive to see it sooner. Were the fears I felt that day actually hidden truths? Even now, after all this time, I still get that cold, sinking feeling whenever those moments come back to me. I am Mike, the youngest in a family with 3 brothers. 10 years ago, when I was 8 years old, my family moved to Forest Hills because my father was transferred for work. The new house was located in a peaceful, spacious, and quieter area. I felt quite comfortable and tried to adjust to the new environment, while my 2 older brothers took more time to get used to it. What fascinated my 2 brothers and me the most was the treehouse, which was located down a dirt path behind our house. It was a simple wooden house, looking like it had been built quite some time ago. The grayish-silver tiled roof, although partially decayed from the rain and sun, still maintained its structure. In the faint light of the setting sun, it looked like a silent ghost, exuding a sense of loneliness. After learning that the treehouse had no owner, my 2 brothers and I were incredibly excited. The way up to the treehouse was not easy. A makeshift wooden ladder was hastily tied to the trunk, with each wooden step worn down over the years. The space was only big enough for 2 people, so my 2 brothers and I would take turns going in to play, and I would always be the last one. Inside the house there was no dust or the musty smell of a forgotten place. An old oil lamp was still in the corner of the room, and a crooked wooden shelf held a few books. I hadn't even had the chance to explore when I heard my older brother calling up, saying that Mom was calling us back for dinner. I felt a bit of regret, telling myself that I would definitely come back tomorrow. Right after school the next afternoon, I didn't go home, but ran straight to the treehouse. The excitement made my heart beat a little faster, and I left my backpack behind to climb more easily. It seems that the items inside have been slightly moved, probably because my brothers visited again. On the wooden shelf, there was a note with rather messy handwriting, asking a greeting and "What's your name?" I guessed this was a prank from my brothers, so I picked up the pen that had fallen nearby, added my name to the note, and asked for the other person's name in return, leaving it in its original spot. I went over to open the small window, just wide enough for a 7-year-old boy at the time to stick his head and shoulders out and enjoy the view outside. I was filled with a sense of joyful exhilaration, imagining myself living in a fairy tale house. The voice and face of my second brother appeared. He called my name with a mocking tone and attitude, telling me to hurry home before Mom gets angry. I pouted and left, followed by him with his teasing remarks. The next day when I returned, the note from yesterday had been replaced, and the person introduced themselves as Mr. Gummy Candy. The days that followed were filled with regular conversations between me and Mr. Gummy Candy through unique note exchanges. He asked me many different questions. At first, it was questions of concern, like whether I had eaten dinner yet, or how I was adjusting to the new school. I was pretty sure that this was one of my brother's pranks, so I decided to stubbornly see it through to the end to expose them. Gradually, Mr. Gummy Candy's questions no longer felt like the familiar teasing from my 2 brothers. Where's your bedroom window located at, kid? I shivered a little when I saw that note and placed it back in its spot without replying. It didn't stop there. The questions became increasingly creepy. What does your pajamas smell like? I felt surrounded by a strange coldness, my mind filled only with questions I didn't want to answer, and a rising sense of fear in my heart. A suffocating feeling rose in my chest, as if the treehouse had turned into a trap, and I, the curious one, had unwittingly walked right into it. It felt as though the space around me suddenly became cramped, and even breathing became difficult. I heard a soft, faint sound coming from inside the house, as if someone had just stepped in behind me. It was just a very small sound, but it was enough to make me jump and turn around, my heart racing wildly. But there was nothing there, no one at all. At that moment, I could clearly feel that the house was no longer a fun place to play. The feeling of terror slowly built up, like a dark shadow closing in on me. I left the pen and the note on the table and quickly ran back home. That evening, I couldn't eat much and couldn't focus on the stories everyone was talking about. My suspicious and probing gaze was fixed on every gesture and expression of my two brothers. That night, it took me quite a while to fall asleep, and what haunted me the most was what awaited me the next morning. As soon as I woke up, with sleepy eyes, I looked out the window and sensed that the light of the new day felt strangely different. After a few seconds of becoming more awake, my nerves suddenly shifted into a state of excitement and panic. Countless gummy candies in all sizes and colors were stuck all over the outside of my window. A child would be delighted to see so many candies, but not me, not in that situation. I screamed loudly, rushed out of my room, and ran to the dining table where my parents and two brothers were. I stammered as I questioned my two brothers, asking who Mr. Gummy Candy was. My parents looked at me in surprise, while my brothers laughed mischievously, saying I had just had a nightmare and was talking nonsense. I angrily told them everything that had happened without even pausing to catch my breath. Under the stern gaze of my parents, my two brothers firmly and decisively insisted that they hadn't played any pranks and hadn't been to the treehouse for a week. And so, the stern and angry gaze of my parents turned toward me. While my dad called the police, my mom tried to calm me down. When the police arrived, they searched around the house but found nothing suspicious. However, they advised my family to be cautious, especially with abandoned houses. The police suggested that it could have been a homeless, perverted person who had been watching and teasing me. After confirming once again that the treehouse had no owner, and with the mayor's approval, my parents had someone come to dismantle the treehouse. I felt much lighter, no longer curious about things with unclear origins. For me, it was a terrifying memory I would never forget, a warning that sometimes harmless pranks can open the door to things we never wish to encounter.
I'm Victor. I'm heading back to my hometown to crash with my parents. After going through a rough patch with work and relationships, I decided to live in the basement since it has everything I need, like a bathroom and a kitchen. It makes me feel like I'm living in my own place. Other than working at my new job, I'll just be hanging out in the basement, reading, listening to music, and enjoying my own space. And it's this basement that both put me at risk and helped me get away from it. A few months ago, one night, there was a crazy storm and I was home alone. After checking all the doors and windows upstairs, I went back to my own space. I turned on the light, read a book, and just enjoyed the sound of the rain. It was so relaxing. By the time my eyes got tired and heavy, I put the book down, but kept the light on like usual and went to bed. The next second, the light went out, and I was engulfed in darkness. I wasn't really freaked out or confused. It's pretty normal for a storm to mess with the power lines. I figured I'd just sleep like that, and everything would be back to normal by morning. I closed my eyes for a bit, then got jolted awake by a loud bang. At first, I thought it was a broken tree branch hitting the window, but the second time, the sound was followed by what I was pretty sure was a metallic noise. The third time I heard the loud noise, I was sure the window had been broken. I jumped up like hell, ran to the basement door, and quietly locked it. Back in bed, I fumbled for my phone to call the police, but the Wi-Fi was down when the power went out, and there was no phone signal. I went back out, stood by the basement door, and tried to listen. Then I realized staying in here was pointless. This basement had no windows, and there was no way out if something went wrong. I held my breath, unlocked the door again, and tiptoed out. My heart was pounding with every step, and it was getting clearer. There were about 2 or 3 people, and they started searching the house upstairs. They were whispering to each other, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. I pictured the house layout. Go upstairs, turn right, and you'll see the kitchen. The window there could help me escape. Using the darkness to my advantage, I started putting this crazy plan into action. Just a few steps I'd usually take, but for some reason, it felt so exhausting in that moment. My mouth was dry, my heart was racing, and I tried to push down my fear to save myself. About 5 steps away from the floor, all I could make out were the blurry silhouettes of 3 guys from the flashlights in their hands. They were all tall, and there were a lot of them, but what really made me freeze was the thing they were holding. Guns. I gasped right away. My mind was all over the place, and the house suddenly felt unrecognizable. Find a way to the basement. Victor's down there. Don't let him know you're coming. What the heck? They know my name. What's going on? Who are these people? I almost lost my balance and nearly fell back into the basement. A chill ran down my spine as I heard the footsteps of the 3 guys above, and their flashlights' faint beams shining through the gaps in the stairs. There were only 5 more steps, but why did each one feel so long? And time seemed to slow down. The guns in their hands made it hard to breathe, and my legs felt like they were going to give out. There was only one thought in my head. How the hell do I get out of here? But the atmosphere felt like it was closing in, suffocating me. Hearing the whispers and footsteps fade away, my mind was too scrambled to come up with a clear plan. In the end, I decided to just run as fast as I could, charging straight into the fear and pushing through it. Only then could I hope to get out. I finally made it to the kitchen, and just then, one of the 3 guys who broke in showed up. He pointed the light at me, and without wasting a second, I opened the window and jumped out. The cold and the force of the storm hit me right away and woke up my nerves. I had just one goal: to get as far away from the house as possible. The road ahead was pitch black, and the only light I had was the occasional flash of lightning to guide me. I tried not to look back, even though I could hear screams and gunshots getting farther away behind me. I ran to the neighbor's house nearby, knocked on the door in a panic, and when it opened, I just collapsed, totally exhausted and cold. The middle-aged neighbor, looking worried, quickly pulled me inside and called the cops right away. In the middle of the storm and all the chaos, I could only breathe a sigh of relief, knowing I was finally safe. Later that night, the place was a mess, with signs of a break-in, and all the valuables were gone. The aftermath of that horrible night wasn't just the stuff I lost, but also the mental scars that stuck with me. I couldn't go back to the basement anymore. Every time I thought about going back, I'd get this wave of panic, like the thieves were still out there, just waiting for the chance to hit again. The banging, footsteps in the night, and the dim flashlight on the stairs, everything turned into creepy memories. I started jumping at every little noise around me. I felt stuck between 2 worlds, my normal everyday life and this dark world of scary memories. I started going to therapy so I could talk about how I was feeling without worrying about being judged. I also started doing medication and working out to keep my mind and body in balance. But real peace still felt pretty far off. Every time it rains and night falls, the creepy feeling comes back. I'm Orla, 29 years old, living in Houston. I have a happy life because I enjoy my work and have extra income. Currently, I live alone in a spacious and cozy house. My house is in a somewhat secluded area of the neighborhood, but that's okay because I like peace and privacy. The neighbors around here aren't very friendly, to say the least. They're somewhat peculiar. I choose not to pay them any mind. They're not relevant to me at all. On that evening, like any other day, I returned home at 6 p.m. After dinner and a shower, I went to bed at 10 p.m., starting to enjoy what I consider the best time of the day. I got into bed, lying comfortably with a book I was halfway through. I called Milo, my cat whom I've had for 2 years. Usually, when Milo hears me call, he happily runs over and lies next to me. But this time he curled up, staring ahead. I looked at Milo and chuckled, thinking he must be full and feeling lazy. I started reading and forgot about Milo's odd behavior. After a while, feeling tired, I changed position, inadvertently noticing that Milo was still lying there, staring under the bed. I approached, picked up Milo, and returned to bed. I placed Milo on my stomach, his favorite lying position. Surprisingly, he fluffed up, emitting little grunts as if being vigilant and uncomfortable with me. Milo jumped off the bed, returning to his previous spot. I sat on the bed, puzzled by his strange behavior. Following Milo's gaze, he was indeed looking under the bed. I started feeling uneasy. I couldn't bring myself to look under the bed, and I didn't know why. Looking around the room, my heart seemed to stop when I inadvertently glanced at the mirror in the corner. The mirror coincidentally reflected a bit under the bed where a dark figure, seemingly a man, was present. I couldn't see his face clearly, just his glaring white, wild eyes staring out. I was truly panicked. I bit my lip, trying not to make any unusual noise. I told myself to stay calm, try to act like I didn't know anything. Otherwise, he might lose control, and I would be in terrible danger. I tried to breathe, regulate my heartbeat, then observe the room to figure out a solution. The first thing I wanted to do was call the police, but my phone was charging and placed on a table 3 meters away from the bed. My body trembled. I wasn't sure if I could get off the bed, but at that moment, I had no choice but to take a risk. I couldn't sit here and panic forever. Slowly, I stepped off the bed, trying to straighten up, pretending I was very comfortable. Approaching the phone, I trembled, trying to dial the police number. I struggled for a while, my brain unable to control my body. Finally, I managed to call the police, but I wasn't calm enough and accidentally turned on the speaker. 911, what's your emergency? I immediately hung up, standing rooted to the ground, squeezing the phone tightly as if trying to break it. It felt like I hadn't breathed for 3 minutes. After seeing no reaction from the man, I immediately texted my best friend to call the police for me. Suddenly, I heard a metallic clash, like a knife scraping under the floor. I sent the message and quickly turned off the phone. I mentally prepared for what would happen next. When I turned back, I panicked to see Milo playing with a small knife under the bed. In an instant, I rushed to pick up Milo and grab the knife, then ran out and slammed the door shut. I stood staring at the door, breathing heavily. It felt like leaving the bedroom gave me enough oxygen to breathe. I hugged Milo tightly, my hands trembling, pointing the knife straight towards the door. I was sure the next thing would be banging on the door, cursing, and a madman rushing out. I was ready to resist at any cost, but I didn't hear any noise. Everything was eerily silent. I couldn't know what that man really wanted, how he managed to break into my house and hide under my bed for how long, whether he would suddenly appear here and end my life. Suddenly, the sound of police sirens rang out, and I hugged Milo tightly, running out quickly. When I met the police, I told them everything that had just happened. I felt relieved. After the police searched my bedroom and all the other nooks and crannies in the house, the truly horrifying thing appeared. They found the body of a dead man under my bed. I was stunned to realize it was Robert, the creepy neighbor. Robert lived alone opposite my house, a man over 50 years old. Robert had repeatedly accosted me to spend the night with him. I overlooked it, thinking he had mental issues, until I lost patience and threatened to call the police. Robert stopped his creepy antics.
After the investigation, the police said Robert died of a sudden stroke. He had been dead for about 12 hours, which was the time I was away on a business trip and hadn't returned home. It was horrifying to imagine how he would have acted if I had been home at that time. I redesigned my house with the bedroom in a different location and started using a mattress directly on the floor instead of a bed. Until now, the image of Robert with his glaring, wild, white eyes still deeply haunts me.
This story begins with a terrifying truth I've been dealing with for over a week. There is a dead body in my basement. It all started when I went down to the basement to do a load of dirty laundry. The moment I flipped the light switch, I was horrified to find a man dressed in a suit and tie lying face up in the middle of the floor. His hands were clasped together like he was praying, and there was a wound on his chest with a pool of blood spreading out. I couldn't move. I just stood there, staring at the motionless man. It took about 10 minutes before my brain started working again. At first, I had this fantasy that it was just some kind of elaborate Halloween prank. I truly wished that were the case, but there was no one else around. When reality finally hit me, I froze up again. A few minutes passed, and I managed to regain a tiny bit of composure. Gathering all the courage I had left, I went and grabbed a hammer from the utility room behind the stairs. I returned, and my heart dropped once more when I saw that his eyes were wide open. I stood there for a few more minutes, wondering what to do next. Then I decided I had to check if he had any ID on him. So, I took a deep breath and started going through his pants pockets. After about a minute of searching, I finally found his wallet. Just as I was checking the contents of the wallet, the light flickered and went out. The basement was completely dark. And then, a cold hand clamped down on my wrist and started squeezing tight. My panic increased tenfold. I actually wet myself. I couldn't control it. I tried desperately to breathe, but still nearly passed out. Then, a second hand locked onto my other arm. I started screaming like a trapped animal. I thrashed around, kicking and punching wildly, trying to defend myself. Then, the person tried to pull me closer. I was going absolutely nuts, struggling backward and kicking non-stop. I reached behind me, hoping to find something to grab, and my hand hit the hammer. It took a moment of fumbling in the dark before I could grab hold of it. Something inside me took over, like I switched to autopilot. I started swinging the hammer hard, and the hand finally loosened its grip on my arm. Suddenly the lights came back on, and a horrifying sight appeared before me. The man was sprawled out, his head twisted awkwardly to the side. His face and neck were covered in deep gashes, and one eye socket was completely smashed. I was paralyzed, and the hammer dropped from my hand. I realized I had killed him. I didn't mean to, it was pure panic. My whole body was shaking uncontrollably. I was consumed by a single feeling, guilt. There are no words to describe the panic and torment that was choking me right then. I had become a killer. I left the basement, locked the door tight, and dragged a table and shelves in front of it to block the entrance. That's when I realized how much danger I was in. If I called the police, they would know I killed the man. A jail cell is the last place on earth I want to visit. The man has been down in the basement for a week now. There hasn't been a single news report about a missing man, so I figure he has no family. I'm thinking I have to get rid of the body. Thank goodness. I don't think I could keep pretending everything was normal if the police came knocking. This last week has truly been hell. The awful memory of smashing his head with the hammer keeps haunting me like a dripping faucet. I went to the hardware store and bought a handsaw, some large trash bags, black duct tape, and a protective suit. That's everything I need to execute my plan. It might take all night, but I shouldn't run into any major problems. I also searched online, which gave me a few ideas on how to dispose of the evidence, but I won't share those details. If everything goes according to this plan, I can get away with it, and over time, it will all fade away. That is the chilling story I read from the diary after I moved into this new house. I'm Alex, and I've been in this new house for 3 days and found the diary in the bedroom. I haven't been down to the basement yet. I haven't even checked or cleaned the entire house. I don't know if what's written in this diary is real or just a cruel joke. Either way, I'm absolutely terrified about finding out. What should I do now? I am seriously thinking about moving out immediately.
Before we continue, I just want to say thank you. MHS crossed over 10,000 subscribers in 2025, and that's all because of you. Every single view, like, and share means the world to me. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. This year, we're setting our sights on 50,000 in 2026. So if you enjoy these videos and haven't subscribed yet, now's the perfect time. Hit that button, join the community, let's grow this together. Now, back to the stories. My name is Richard Brown. I am 45 years old now. When you reach middle age, you realize that some things you thought were forgotten are actually still right there, buried deep inside. There are mistakes that can't be erased, even if you spend your entire youth paying for them. And there is one person I still love deeply, even after being apart for 15 years. I moved back to this town after 15 years away. It all started when I stumbled upon the Instagram account of the woman I loved most, Elisa. My heart raced when I saw her picture. Elisa was just as beautiful as ever. I looked through all her posts and discovered she had never married. A crazy spark of hope lit up in my mind. Maybe she's still waiting for me. I didn't rush to see her right away. I returned like a stranger, quietly hanging out at old familiar street corners to gather news. I patiently waited for the perfect chance to approach her naturally. The first day I saw her again at a coffee shop, I was as nervous as a 19-year-old boy. After hesitating for a while, I gathered all my courage to walk up and start a conversation. But Elisa reacted with a look of total strangeness, which left me feeling completely crushed. Maybe time had changed my appearance too much. I realized I wasn't the handsome guy I used to be. I was wrinkled and my skin had grown dark. But my feelings for her hadn't changed for a single second. Seeing Elisa's confusion as she walked away only made me more determined to make her recognize me. That night, I went to Elisa's house. In my coat pocket was a silver necklace, a keepsake of our love that I had held onto for 15 years. When Elisa opened the door, the hallway light spilled out, showing her guarded expression. "Elisa, it's me," I whispered, holding the necklace out into the light. The silence that followed was suffocating. I saw Elisa's pupils shrink and her lips began to tremble violently. Then she gasped the name I had been longing to hear from her lips for so long. "Richard Brown?" I tried to step forward, wanting to hug her and make up for 15 years of being apart. But Elisa suddenly backed away as if she were looking at a monster that had just crawled out of the mud. There was no warmth, no happy tears. There was only pure horror and intense rage. "How dare you show your face here?" Elisa screamed. "You ruined my life. You took everything from me. Get out before I call the police." I stood there frozen, my head spinning. Ruined? But I loved her. I had sacrificed my entire youth for this love. While I was stuttering, trying to explain, Elisa backed into the house and grabbed the phone. "Please, there's a murderer at my house. Get here now." I was stunned. Elisa had just called me a murderer. What could I have possibly done to deserve this much hate? The door slammed in my face. In a moment of pure desperation, I couldn't accept being cast away like a leper. I broke through the door, only wanting to hold her, to make her understand how much I had missed her. But Elisa panicked and ran toward the kitchen. I caught up and tried to grab her, and we began to struggle. In the chaos, she slipped on the tile floor. Her head hit the edge of the stone counter with a sickening thud, and she collapsed. Blood began to spread across the floor. I stood there, paralyzed. Elisa lay motionless in a pool of blood, the flickering kitchen light hitting her pale face. That sight was like a whirlwind that sucked me back to that haunting night years ago. The past came rushing back. It wasn't a story of a romantic, forbidden love. It was a bloody tragedy that I had painted over with the pink lies of my own denial. Back then, I was 19, poor, and full of resentment. Elisa's parents looked down on me, treating me like trash that wasn't worthy of touching their daughter's hem. That night, driven mad by longing and wounded pride, I broke into their house. Elisa's father was standing there in the dark with a gun in his hand. He gave me an ultimatum, threatening to shoot if I didn't disappear forever. In a fit of rage and fear, I lunged at him to grab the gun. A shot rang out, a fatal hit straight to his chest right in front of my eyes. When Elisa's mother ran downstairs screaming, I pushed her aside in a desperate attempt to escape. Her head hit the stone steps. Now, in this silent kitchen, Elisa lay still in the exact same way. The scene was a perfect, horrible copy of the tragedy from years ago. I wasn't the victim of a sad breakup. I was the monster who turned the life of the woman I loved into ashes. 15 years in prison wasn't the price I paid to come back and love her. It was the punishment for wiping out her family. And yet, I had the nerve to return, carrying that blood-stained silver necklace to beg for forgiveness. The police sirens echoed in the distance, getting louder and closer. I dropped to my knees beside Elisa, my shaking hands touching her cooling skin. I thought I had come back to start over, but it turns out I only came back to finish the devil's work.
Emily stared out the window at the Appalachian Mountains, shrouded in mist. Her family had been staying at this mountain cabin for 3 weeks. The patches of eczema on her arms had faded quite a bit. When they first arrived, she really hated the place. She thought living here was like being isolated in the middle of the woods. She especially hated spending her whole summer here to treat her skin condition. Connor, Emily's 13-year-old brother, felt the same way. He constantly complained about being away from his video games and friends. But now, with only a week left before they went home, she felt a sense of loss. Emily had truly come to love the clean air and mornings filled only with bird calls instead of traffic noise. That evening, Emily's parents received a phone call that sounded very serious. The kids only saw them rush into their room to pack quickly. When they came out, their mom explained that her dad's best friend had passed away, and they had to drive down to the city that night to make it for the funeral the next morning. They would be back in just 2 days. Their mom gave Emily careful instructions about taking care of herself and looking out for her brother. To instill a sense of fear, and also as a precaution, she told the 2 kids a story. Deep in these Appalachian woods, people rumored there was a creature called Bigfoot. It wasn't just huge, it could also mimic noises and even human voices to trick people into opening their doors. Especially curious kids, she warned. So, no matter what you hear, you must not open the door. Your dad and I will open it ourselves when we get back. Emily and her brother promised they would follow their mother's instructions exactly. The first day passed by fairly peacefully, apart from Connor's usual complaints of boredom. That night, a car horn suddenly blared at midnight. It wasn't a normal honk, but a repeated, frantic-sounding blast. Emily woke up with a start. The horn kept blaring without stopping, making her both curious and scared. Connor ran into her room. "Did you hear that?" "Someone's out there." Emily motioned for him to be quiet. The 2 siblings crept down to the living room, only daring to switch on one dim light on the staircase. The horn was still sounding, seeming to come from the trail not far away, but there were no headlights, no engine noise. Connor started to move toward the door, but Emily quickly pulled him back. "Don't go out." "But what if someone needs help? Nobody's there. It's Bigfoot." Emily vividly remembered her mother's warning. Bigfoot could mimic sounds. She was sure it was using the car horn to lure them outside. The two siblings stood listening for a moment longer. The horn kept going on and on. Emily was certain no one would honk that long. Then, the horn stopped abruptly. Silence descended. The two listened for another while before heading back to their rooms to go back to sleep. Both planned to tell their parents everything as soon as they returned. The next morning, Emily prepared breakfast. She tried to call her mom, but there was no cell service. The signal was always weak here, but today she couldn't get anything at all. She couldn't call her dad either. Emily had planned to ask her parents to buy more bread because the pantry was empty. A while later, as the two siblings were watching TV in the living room, a knock suddenly came at the door. They exchanged surprised looks. Then the knocking sounded again, and a man's voice called out from outside. "Is anyone home? I'm a police officer. I need to talk to you about something important." This time, Emily again wouldn't let her brother open the door. "It's the police, Emily. It's Bigfoot. Didn't you forget what Mom warned us about?" The knock came again, a third time, longer this time. "I know you two are inside. This is about your parents." Connor jumped. He knows about Mom and Dad. Emily gripped her brother's hand tight. "Probably overheard what Mom told us. It knows they're gone. Don't believe it." The man outside continued his announcement. "Your parents were in an accident. I need to talk to you." Emily covered Connor's ears. "Don't listen. It's trying to trick us." The two siblings backed further into the room, trying to ignore it. But almost 10 minutes passed, and the knocking didn't stop. The man's voice remained patient. "Sis, what if it really is the police? What if Mom and Dad are actually in trouble?" Emily shook her head, but she herself was starting to panic. Emily walked over to the side window, trying to look out very carefully. Through a crack in the curtains, she saw a police cruiser parked in the yard. An officer stood in front of the door. Emily and her brother walked toward the main door. They stood before the door, hands on the doorknob. If it was Bigfoot, it would kill them both. But if it was the police, and her parents were really in danger? "You don't need to be afraid. I'm Officer Kevin. I just need to confirm your parents' identities." While Emily was still hesitating, Connor pushed his sister aside and decisively opened the door. Emily tried to stop him, but it was too late. A police officer stood there, looking at the siblings with sad eyes. He sighed softly. "Your parents are Robert and Susan Taylor, correct?" Emily nodded, her heart starting to race. "This morning, we found a car that had gone off a cliff. The license plate matches your parents' car. The two people inside did not survive." Time seemed to stop. Emily heard the words, but her brain couldn't process them. Connor clutched his sister's sleeve tightly. The officer continued, his voice slow and clear. "The accident happened about 1 o'clock last night. The car lost control and plunged into the ravine. 1 o'clock last night." Emily remembered the repeated car horn the two siblings had distinctly heard. So it wasn't Bigfoot. It wasn't the monster. It was Mom and Dad. Mom and Dad were trying to call for help. Emily burst into tears. Emily blamed herself. If the two of them had gone out to check, or quickly called the police, instead of just standing there listening, then her parents might have been saved. Emily thought she was so stupid. She was 15 years old. Why didn't she know how to handle something like this? Connor was wailing loudly. Emily was stunned. She just stared out at the Appalachian Mountains. Beautiful and brutal mountains. Her mother had told the story about Bigfoot to protect them, but that very story had killed two people. There was no monster. Only fear had just stolen Emily's and her brother's parents. I am Elias, and I had just moved into a house in the suburbs of Oregon. I did a quick cleanup and planned to buy some basic necessities for the new place, but after a walkthrough, I was quite impressed. The previous owner seemed to have left almost everything, from the dishware on the kitchen shelf to the oak desk in the reading room. I thought I wouldn't have to spend much. Everything was so easy. When I reached the end of the hallway, I found the door leading to the basement was locked. A piece of paper was taped to it, cautioning me to be careful when going down because it's damp and not clean. I accepted this. I had no plans for that dark cellar anyway. While cleaning up, I was suddenly struck by the existence of a fabric-covered sofa in the living room. It was too old and outdated, completely out of place with the modern feel of the rest of the house. As I got closer, I began to notice a strange smell coming from the couch. At first, I thought it was the scent of old, damp fabric, but the odor became clearer and more unpleasant. It was slightly fishy, but mixed with a strong fragrance, like perfume or cosmetics. An odd combination. I decided I needed to call a professional cleaning service, but first, I would try to deodorize it myself. I opened the drawer of a nearby cabinet to look for air freshener. There was no air freshener. Instead, there were strange items: a small knife, a large roll of duct tape, and a pair of medical rubber gloves. I froze. I remembered these items hadn't been there when I cleaned before, but I wasn't entirely sure. I've been quite forgetful lately. I took the items out of the drawer, intending to deal with them later. I returned to examine the sofa more closely. Looking carefully between the worn cushions, I began to find personal items: a silver women's watch, a few hair ties, an earring, and long blonde strands of hair. Definitely not mine. I flipped the cushion completely and found a notebook. It was a journal, filled with messy handwriting. I took it to another place, where I couldn't smell that disturbing odor, to read. The initial content was a description of a girl named Elle. The journal's author described her as having an attractive figure, a charming way of speaking, golden blonde hair, and a radiant smile. But the tone quickly turned into that of a stalker. The notes were morbidly detailed about her schedule, which coffee shop Lila went to at what time, what kind of coffee she liked, what kind of car she drove, what time she returned home, and a chilling emphasis that she never locks the back gate. Finally, a line written in thick red ink on the last page sent a chill down my spine. No one has seen her since Tuesday. They are putting up posters, but I know where she is. I sat in silence. A terrible suspicion flared up. Lila had been kidnapped, quite possibly by the person who wrote this journal. Horribly, she might still be held captive or dead, and the sofa in my house might very well be where the crime took place. I glanced toward the couch. Suddenly, a terrible headache hit me. My heart pounded furiously. My chest felt like it was about to explode, and cold sweat poured out. I had to grab the wall to keep from falling. I staggered toward the window, opening it to breathe the cold air. In the reflective glass, I saw my own face smiling. She thought she could run. How adorable. I spun my head around, my gaze slowly sweeping toward the small hallway, which led to the old, locked basement door. Today is Saturday. She's been down there for 5 days. The headache returned, stronger this time, more violent, as if two brains were fighting inside my skull. I screamed, clutching my head. A few seconds later, the pain subsided. The initial fear and horror returned, amplified tenfold. And then, chilling fragments of memory flooded back. Not the memories of Elias who just moved, but of someone else. I looked down at my hands holding the journal. I recognized the handwriting. It was all my handwriting, but with a different name, Agan. I looked at the basement door where I knew Lila's body lay. A cold shiver ran down my spine. No, it wasn't me. It couldn't be me. It was 2014. I was in my final semester at the University of Louisiana. Winter here isn't bitterly cold like in the north, but it carries a damp chill. During a career fair, I met Rachel. She was also a senior student with chestnut hair and a radiant smile. Our relationship developed naturally, became serious, and just 2 years later, we had a simple yet warm wedding. Rachel became pregnant soon after. When our first daughter was born, I had a stable, well-paying job in finance, enough for Rachel to fulfill her dream of being a full-time mom and taking care of our home. A few years passed, and our little home welcomed a new member, a handsome baby boy. I loved my children immensely, enjoying every moment of watching them grow up. I cherished every second of that happiness and believed I had a stable and fulfilling life. One cold Saturday afternoon, I was lying on the sofa, covered with a light blanket, watching a football game on TV. As I drifted off, my eyes suddenly fixed on a red indicator light blinking from the Wi-Fi router in the corner of the room. The strange thing was that the light was inexplicably blurry and distorted, while every other object in the room was clear and sharp. I rubbed my eyes and looked again, but the light still looked extremely weird. Its shape was even inverted compared to reality. I told myself I was too tired after a long work week. I didn't mention anything to my wife and children when they came home that afternoon. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sneaked down to the living room. Like a hypnotized man, I sat for hours on the sofa, staring intently at that tiny red light. Its mysterious feeling captivated me in a sickly way. The next morning, Rachel found me slumped on the sofa. She shook me awake with a worried look, but I just said I didn't feel well and decided to take the day off work. I continued to do the same thing, sitting motionless, not going to work, not showering, not eating, just fixated on that red light. My obsession grew exponentially. In my mind, the light was no longer a small dot. It gradually swelled, taking up the entire room, emitting a dazzling, intense red glow, like a door sucking everything in. I no longer reacted to Rachel's words or touches. Her voice sounded increasingly distant. My children's laughter seemed muffled by a layer of thick water. I was almost completely absorbed by that light. Suddenly, everything shattered. I heard fierce, piercing screams and echoing voices from a very distant place. A terrifying, excruciating pain slammed into my head, throbbing and dizzying down to my bones. I opened my eyes, and a coldness instantly replaced the warmth of the sofa. I found myself lying on the cold, wet sidewalk in front of an old brick building on the University of Louisiana campus. A crowd of students and faculty members surrounded me, looking at me with expressions of confusion and pity. A tall police officer rushed over, helped me up, and guided me into his patrol car. He said I had just been attacked by a football player during a brawl, hitting my head twice and passing out. I was dazed, but my mind immediately turned to my family. I gripped the police officer's arm and urgently asked him, "Where is my wife, Rachel, and my children? Are they here?" The police officer stopped, his face full of confusion and bewilderment. He looked at me, and what he said next was one of the most impactful sentences of my life. "What are you talking about, kid? I don't see anyone, just you." Right then, the physical pain no longer mattered. My entire 10-year world just shattered. I slowly realized the painful truth that Rachel was not real. My children were not real. 10 years of my life, including the stable job, the warm home, everything did not exist. It was all just a profound hallucination. a perfect 3D image constructed while I was in a coma after that head trauma. I was still a final year student, 19 years old. I was taken to the hospital and physically recovered completely. The headache went away, but the pain in my soul did not. After being discharged, I fell into severe depression. I struggled every day to accept that my family had never existed. I missed the taste of the morning coffee Rachel used to make. I missed the feeling of my daughter's small hand clutching mine. It was all fake, but the memories and the love I felt for them were completely real. I had lived 10 years of love, and this loss is beyond words. I had to undergo intensive psychological treatment, trying to confront the biggest loss of my life, a life that was not real, but had once been everything to me. I survived an attack, but I couldn't escape the image that attack had created. The greatest enemy is not death, but the loss of a life that never existed. I keep telling myself that, trying to find a way out of the shadow of the red light. The story above is based on a true account. Mitch, a final year student, suffered a head injury during a brawl in 2004 and fell into a coma. In this state, he lived an illusory decade with a wife and 2 children. Upon waking up, he realized it was all a delusion. Though physically recovered, Mitch sank into depression, grieving the loss of a life that never was.
I'm Maddie, 27 years old. I've been working in this local hospital for 4 years now. The work is very stressful, yet I am happy with this work. Nothing beats seeing the patients you cared for getting better. For the entire time, I had not enough time to have any attachment. My dedication all poured into my work. The job demands me to stay at the hospital in the night shifts. Each week, I generally have 2 to 3 graveyard shifts like that. It starts from 7 o'clock at night and will grind through until 7 o'clock the next morning. Yet despite the tough time, the team would help each other by further dividing the shift into smaller batches, each one covering their respective section. I have encountered many types of emergencies, and many times the patients encountered serious accidents. There was this Wednesday, when I was having a quick shut-eye. Suddenly, there was a person coming in, groaning in pain. "Please help me." I jolted back awake and jumped down to the clinic main hallway. There was a man having a lot of lacerations all over his body trotting in. He's in too much pain, I believe, screaming for help, trying to walk in. I frantically called out to other nurses and pushed out a gurney by myself. Carefully lifted the man into the bed. I reeled him into the ER room as quickly as I could. A trail of blood formed on his way to the ER. After reeling the man for a short distance, I started to realize something strange. He's very light. I could barely feel any weight, and as if I was reeling an empty gurney. Despite my initial doubt, he turned around smiling, thanking me. Meanwhile, I was so concentrated in doing first aids, asking him the questions while I'm cleaning up his wounds so I could somewhat gauging his level of consciousness. But he kept repeating whatever I'm saying with an expressionless face. Even his eyes weren't blinking at all. After cleaning his wound, I once again asked the questions so that I could write down his information for further treatments. This time he was silent, yet still smirked back at me with his expressionless face. There's little time to waste, so I told him to stay put until I came back with more help and equipment. It's a surprise for such injuries that he was still stable enough to make it to the clinic. Normally, for such injuries, people would come to the clinic with family members or good Samaritans. Or maybe he was a homeless person, for those people weren't known to gather a crowd, especially when going to get treatments. Now, after some time, I suddenly realized that I was the only one taking care of this man. My other colleagues were nowhere to be found. Other nurses and the watch doctor were not there, and despite my ceaseless pleas, they're not yet present, which prompted me to resorting to knocking on their doors to wake them up. The first one would be the ER doctor of the watch. I knocked on his door very quickly and loudly. I quickly summarized for him the situation of the patient and which room he was set down in. However, he did not open the door as I hoped he would, prompting me to slam on his door more and more. The doctor finally gave in. He walked out to greet me with an annoyed expression. I knew him. That's Dr. James, a 38-year-old veteran doctor with many years of experience under his belt. He didn't talk much, yet every time working with him, I felt very stressful. His gaze on me always frightened me, and he seemed to judge me every step of the way. I dreaded every time he grabbed onto the needles. Returning to the ER patient, I tried to report the situation to Dr. James, but instead of caring, he just sighed, as if exhausted, and just told me, "Please return to your room. Let me get other nurses to come." There's a hint of sleepiness and grogginess in his voice. "This is my watch, and it is my responsibility." His firm words shook me to my core. Why, I asked myself, why such a freaking doctor be so heartless to his own patient in such dire conditions? I returned to my quarter furious. His irresponsibility would not go unnoticed, I thought. This incident was guaranteed to be reported to head of department. I grabbed some medical equipment and quickly roused up a few nurses and technicians up to help the patient. I ran to their sleeping quarter, turning on the light and opening up the door. Everyone in the room, in stark contrast with my expectation, threw me nothing but contempt. "Get the fuck out of here, you nuthead. This is a non-authorized entry area." I was dumbfounded with their hostile attitude. I, once again, reiterated the patient's dire conditions and asking them to help. One of the nurses rudely stood up and shoved me back to the hallway before promptly slamming the door in my face. I sat alone in the dark, quiet corridor. Those cold-hearted bastards, are they even humans? No, I now knew I could no longer rely on the other nurses. I will perform the treatment myself. I quickly returned to the ER room, where the man was still waiting for treatment. The bandages on him earlier had all turned crimson red. The bed was equally smeared with blood. The iron rust smell exuded all over. Okay, massive bleeding, letter M of MARCH algorithm. Despite the amount of blood oozing out, the man still smiled at me, eyes wide open. I managed the wound closure with the best care I could, all the while talking to the man, trying to calm him and myself down. "What's your name, sir?" I asked, and once again, he kept repeating my question like a parrot. "Okay, so how about I call you Dante?" "Dante!" He repeated the name, seemed like agreeing on my point. Dante. Dante's the name that had the root in Ecclesiarchy Latin, originating from the word durante. Duro, it means hardened and persistent. The name Dante means someone that endured many hardships, yet still held strong. It was just like this man. I could clearly feel his unbreakable spirit, clinging on despite all the pain and blood loss. I managed to handle the wounds as best as I could. Even though enduring a lot of small procedures with zero pain medication, Mr. Dante here still kept up his smile, and his eyes still opened wide, as if nothing had happened to him. After all those procedures, now it's time to get him some pain medication, some oral ones, and a shot. By the time I had finished the shot and was about to discard the trash, suddenly, Dante laughed out loud. I turned my head around, and here I saw Mr. Dante swiveled his head at an improbable angle to look at me. Still, he gave me an expressionless smile
and 2 eyes wide open. But at this point, it started to get more and more creepy. He laughed a lot, yet his chest was barely rising. I quickly came over to calm him down. Likely it's a state of shock. Yet as soon as I touched the man, his arm fell right off the sockets. I screamed aloud at the sight, terrified, as the bloodied arm sunk into the ground. When I looked at Dante, he still looked at me, his face frozen up in an expressionless smile. And then, when I hugged him tighter to bring him down to the bed, I could hear the bones cracking. Dante's body was slowly disintegrating, starting with the limbs and then to the head. The laughter slowly turned into a buzzing sound. His eyes, for the longest time without any noticeable blinking, completely closed off. Blood soaked out into my nurse's uniform, prompted me to just scream. It's all I could do. Everything in front of me was too surreal to even be true. Suddenly, the doors opened. Dr. James and 2 other nurses came in. Their faces were very serious. "Hold her down." "Hold her down," James said, ordered 2 nurses to hold me under while I came to get the syringe full of fluids. This was the one that had always been haunting me. Myself hopelessly struggled while the cold hard needle punctured my skin, the shearing pain raking through my body. I could feel clearly the frozen liquid coursing through my body as soon as James pulled out the syringe. A tingling numbness came suddenly, and I slowly lost my vision in a blackened blur. Then it all became pitch black. When I came back to my senses, I woke up in the same room as the last time I was there. How many days was it? I couldn't tell. On the floor was an old doll that was torn into pieces, yet still attached on one another by crudely made stitches. When I picked up the doll's head, suddenly there's a buzzing laughter, prompted me to throw it away in fear, together with a loud scream. That doll also mimicked my scream, albeit in a crude and outworldly creepy way. When I lifted my hands to cover up my face, I saw a wristband with some letter written on it. Maddie Taylor, 1997, 02-28, number 172006, McLean Psychiatric Hospital, Belmont, Massachusetts, 02478. The door abruptly opened. Dr. James and 2 previous vicious nurses came over me, their eyes hawking me uncomfortably. "You better behave and keep quiet at nighttime, ma'am. There are many other patients, and they would appreciate the peace," James sternly demanded. "Wait a minute. What? So I am a patient in the mental asylum?" The dark world in my cupboard for 6 years. I was always locked in the kitchen cupboard by my parents. The first time was when I was 6 years old. I was terrified, panicking, screaming, and resisting. I'm not sure what I did wrong at that time, but I kept crying and apologizing. "I'm sorry. I ate a cookie. I'm sorry, Dad. Mom." My parents' face showed no emotion. I innocently asked them, "Why are you putting me in here?" "Well, why not?" That's a phrase that haunts me to my very core. I looked through the keyhole to catch a glimpse of the outside world. I can't remember how long I had been inside, but just as I was about to faint from exhaustion, the sound of the cupboard lock being opened echoed. My mother picked me up and placed me at the dining table. Although all I wanted at that moment was to use the restroom, I didn't dare to ask. The subsequent times I was locked in the kitchen cabinet occurred more frequently and lasted longer. I still resisted, still begged, and was filled with fear. After being released, everything went back to normal.
except for being locked up. I was doing well. I was growing strong and plump, but it was only physically. A part of my soul had been worn away through those times of being locked up. The longest was 3 days when I was 7 years old. My parents locked the cupboard and went to town. By the time they returned, I felt like I was at the end of my life. Darkness, cramped space, and the smell of dampness, all of it had become incredibly familiar to me. I no longer screamed, resisted, or begged. Instead, I embraced it. I savored my own space, glancing through the keyhole to see my parents passing by occasionally. It seemed that their confinement was an attempt to make me disappear, but it only strengthened my existence even more. As my body grew, I found more comfortable positions to lie in and learned to adapt. And I realized that I enjoyed being confined. I liked the feeling of being cramped and suffocated. Once I witnessed a tense argument between my parents. They mentioned me in that argument. Mom said that because of me, she had lost many opportunities. At that time, I was already 10 years old, but I couldn't fully understand everything that was happening in that argument. But I understood that my parents didn't love me. I withdrew into myself, seeking joy in a world that was just mine. When I turned 12, my parents stopped locking me in the cupboard. I wondered, "Why don't you let me in there anymore, Mom?" "Why not?" Mom said with a gentle smile as she looked at me. I guessed it was probably because my body had grown too big for that cupboard. So I chose to lock myself in the wardrobe, under the study table, under the bed. I would crawl into all the dark, confined spaces whenever I had nothing else to do. And then I found the perfect spot, a small cupboard in my parents' room. It was half the size of a refrigerator, with a door that opened outward, located above the wardrobe. I only dared to go in there when my parents were out, timing my escape to ensure I'd be gone before they returned. One time, I fell asleep, perhaps because that secret place was just too comfortable. When I heard the sound of something breaking, I jolted awake. Peering through the crack of the door, I felt a surge of anxiety as I realized my parents had returned, but something felt off. They stood looking at each other with angry eyes. The furniture shattered on the floor, and then Dad pulled out the gun. And in a brief moment, it rendered Mom motionless on the crimson floor. Mom was staring directly at me, her eyes filled with immense pain and despair, as if she were blaming me. I wasn't sure if I could even breathe at that moment. Staying in the cupboard with my body stiff, I looked at my mother for a long time, and my father did the same, until another loud gunshot rang out, tearing through my eardrums. Dad fell down, right next to Mom. I was determined not to go outside, sitting in my own world while observing my parents' world. Until the police arrived, they found me and took me to the hospital. I remember at that time I was suffering from severe mental illness. I had completely lost all emotions towards everything around me. After 6 months in the hospital, I was taken to a children's welfare center. My life from here stepped into a new world, one filled with more emotions. I spent many years afterwards trying to escape the dark and cramped places. I even got a new name, leaving all the pain of the past behind. I always remember my parents. The last image of them is something I can never forget. That will be a memory, a sad memory, rather than an obsession within me. I can't understand why my parents treated me that way. I hope no child will ever be as unfortunate as I was back then.
I'm Ethan. I work nights at a DHL supply chain warehouse. Last year, I got into a bad car accident, messed up my car real bad, and lost my full-time gig as a delivery driver. That crash didn't just take the guy crossing the street, it took my peace too. The police said it was an accident, but that didn't make me feel any better. I still hear the crash, still see the shock in the guy's eyes right before he went down. Haunts me no matter how much I want to forget. Tried taking some meds to calm me down. Worked at first, but the nightmares crept back in. Waking up gasping for air, drenched in sweat, and that constant whisper in my head. Doctor said I might have PTSD. Tried therapy for a bit, but after a few sessions, I just couldn't keep going. The past still feels like a wound that never really healed. My next job was just a way to avoid sleeping at night, better than working during the day and drowning in guilt. The warehouse is out on the edge of town, a big old building with crappy lighting on the tall shelves. About a week after I started, I heard the first weird noises, a low hum, kind of like wind blowing through, then footsteps echoing from way down the hall. Tried telling myself it was just the old vents acting up, but that uneasy feeling wouldn't go away. One night I heard a whisper, real close. The voice wasn't loud, but I heard every word clear as day.
Can you see me?
I froze, gripping my flashlight tight, but when I turned around, no one was there. Told myself it was probably just my imagination, but the weird stuff didn't stop. One time, I found a dirty handprint on a shelf, smudged like someone pressed their hand there, and then vanished. One night in the security room, I was watching last week's footage and saw myself standing in the middle of the hallway. But one thing freaked me out. My shadow on the floor wasn't moving, even though I was walking. That sent chills down my spine. I replayed the video over and over, but the shadow stayed still, like it wasn't even mine. The longer I worked there, the more out of it I felt. One time, a co-worker from the day shift said he saw me standing at the office door, just staring at the doorknob for ages. I didn't remember any of it. He laughed it off, trying to make it less creepy, saying, "Guess you were sleepwalking and didn't know it." But his eyes said he didn't really believe it. Sometimes, I'd find myself standing in the cold storage, holding a flashlight that wasn't even on, and I had no clue how I got there. Another time, I snapped out of it and realized I was in front of the office door, just staring at the doorknob, exactly like my coworker said. Checked the camera footage, and there I was, standing there for over 10 minutes, totally unaware. One day, while cleaning up, I found an old photo that had fallen next to a shelf. It showed a group of workers standing in front of the building on the day the warehouse opened. And right there, among the faces, I saw someone familiar, the guy I hit in the car accident last year. Flipped the photo over and the caption said, "Our first supervisor, John Harris." Chills ran down my spine when I realized my past, and this place had been connected long before I even started working here. My heart sank. How the hell could this be? I looked it up and found out he used to work here, back before the warehouse got shut down for a while after an accident. A worker died in that accident, and the place stayed closed for almost a year. I didn't know if it was just some messed up coincidence, or if I had somehow brought a piece of his past back here with me. That night, around 3 a.m., the lights in the warehouse went out. I flicked on my flashlight, but the weak beam barely lit up a few steps in front of me. Then I heard footsteps, slow, heavy, like someone was getting closer. I swung the flashlight down the hallway, and there he was, just standing there, not moving, with his eyes glowing in the dark. He walked toward me, not fast, but steady. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. My heart just stopped cold, and in that moment, it hit me hard. He's not someone else. He's me. The way he stood, the wild look in his eyes, everything was exactly like me. I quit my job the next morning, But the nightmares didn't stop. Tried telling myself it was all in my head, just my tired, messed up mind playing tricks on me. But that next night, while I was trying to sleep, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my apartment. Slow, heavy footsteps, the same ones I heard in the warehouse. When I walked into the kitchen, I froze. The fridge door was cracked open, and the light inside flickered, just like those busted lights back at the warehouse. A shiver ran down my spine when the door slowly closed, on its own. I don't even know what's real anymore, what's in my head and what's not. Maybe I never really escaped that accident. Maybe part of me died with that guy, and now I'm just a shadow, lost and empty. I'm Jack, 20, living in the small town of Cedar Falls. My girlfriend Olivia and I work at Wendy's to save up for a car. We often pull the night shift because the pay is better and there are fewer customers. Olivia and I have been together for almost 2 years now. She'd always sing pop songs while wiping down tables. I loved hearing her laughter echo through the empty restaurant. Last week, my buddy Mike called to warn me about a serial killer operating in the area. He was targeting people working late at fast food joints. 3 cases had already happened in the past 2 months in neighboring towns. "Be careful, Jack. He usually attacks right before closing," Mike said over the phone. I wasn't too worried. Cedar Falls is a safe town. Tonight, Olivia felt sick and left early. I was cleaning up the restaurant alone. The clock showed 11:30 p.m. Outside, my car was the only one left in the parking lot. I was mopping the floor when my car alarm suddenly blared, piercing the quiet. I looked up and peered outside. A man was standing next to my car. He was wearing a black hoodie, his face completely obscured by the hood. I knew he was looking directly at me through the glass. I dropped the mop and walked to the door. "What are you doing?" I yelled through the glass. The man didn't answer. He just stood there, staring at me. The alarm kept blaring. I pulled out my phone to call the police, but before the call could connect, the man vanished. I scanned the parking lot, but he was nowhere to be seen. The alarm stopped. I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking it might just be a random person who accidentally bumped into the car. I turned back to continue cleaning. Suddenly, the sound of shattering glass erupted from the back of the kitchen. I froze for a few seconds, then ran towards the sound. The small back window was smashed. Glass shards were scattered all over the floor, and a cold wind continuously blew in. "Hello?" I called out, my voice trembling slightly. No answer. I stepped carefully over the glass, looking out the window. Darkness enveloped the alley behind the restaurant. Trash cans were haphazardly placed, some knocked over. I turned back and saw wet footprints on the floor. The footprints led from the broken window to the dining area. My blood ran cold. He was inside. I tiptoed forward, gripping the mop handle tightly. The tables and chairs were still neat. Everything seemed normal. But I heard heavy breathing somewhere in the darkness. "I know you're there." "The police are coming," I yelled. Suddenly, a raspy chuckle echoed from behind the order counter. A man stepped out. He held a large knife in his hand, its blade stained with fresh blood. His face gradually appeared under the light. There was something both familiar and strange. Pale skin, deep sunken eyes. "I've been waiting for you." I recoiled, my hands trembling as I held the mop. "What do you want?" "Where's Olivia?" he asked, taking slow steps closer to me. My heart stopped. How did he know about my girlfriend? I stared at him, my face a mask of shock. "It's just me." The man chuckled softly. "No, she's still here." I looked at him with a skeptical gaze, my heart suddenly beating faster and stronger. I pulled out my phone and called Olivia, but the line was just a long beep without any response. Suddenly, the man burst into laughter. He pointed towards the cold storage. I followed his gaze and then ran towards it. The freezer door was slightly ajar. I trembled as I pushed the door open and saw Olivia lying on the floor, blood seeping from multiple stab wounds on her body. My eyes and mouth widened as much as they could, my body shaking uncontrollably. I knelt beside her. "Olivia! Olivia!" Rage surged through me. I turned and lunged at the man with the mop in my hand. A struggle ensued. He was stronger than I thought. Finally, I grabbed the knife and stabbed him multiple times in the chest. He collapsed, blood pooling on the floor. I sat there, gasping for breath, staring at his lifeless body for a long time. When I regained my composure, I panicked even more. I quickly ran to find my phone and called the police. 15 minutes later, police cars and an ambulance arrived. I told the whole story to Sheriff Peterson, who was an acquaintance of mine. I knew him because he used to be a friend of my dad's. "Jack, are you sure about what you just told me?" Chief Peterson asked. "Yes, Chief. He killed Olivia, and I just acted in self-defense. But when they examined the scene, nothing was as I had said. There were no signs of a broken window, no wet footprints, and most importantly, no body of the man. It was just me, a deceased Olivia, and the knife covered in my fingerprints." "Jack Morrison, you're under arrest," Chief Peterson said, his face filled with sadness. "No. Chief Peterson, you have to believe me. There was another man. He killed Olivia, but the evidence was too clear. Not only the knife and fingerprints, but the security cameras showed only Olivia and me in the restaurant. There was no one else." In the months that followed in prison, I kept repeating the story about that man. I drew his face, described him in detail to the psychiatrist. But everyone said I was hallucinating due to stress. In my cell, I looked in the mirror. A pale face, deep-set eyes, a twisted smile. It was my own face. The man I saw that night was no one else. It was me, a deranged version of myself. Memories started flooding back. I remembered the anger I felt when Olivia said she wanted to break up that night. I chased her into the walk-in freezer. I remembered the knife in my hand and her final look of terror. I sat in the corner of my cell, holding my head and weeping, not because I was wrongly convicted, but because I finally remembered who I truly was, a killer. I was on my way to a small town in Oregon, where my father had lived for over 20 years. Ahead of me was a rough road, covered on both sides by gloomy tree canopies. In the car, I felt a mix of nerves and a vague, unnameable feeling. I'm Maddie, 26 years old, and I grew up in Michigan with my mom. Mom never wanted to talk about him. All I knew was his name was David Marsh, and he lived in a small Oregon town. He had intentionally cut off all contact since I was born. I didn't believe my father didn't love me. There must have been some reason, or someone, that made him act that way. When I heard the news that he had passed away, I couldn't quite name my feelings. Probably just emptiness. Because you can't force yourself to grieve for someone you've never met. I learned that my father was alone when he died and was given the address where he lived. I decided to go there. I told Mom, and she didn't stop me. I arrived in the late afternoon. My father's house was a single-story wooden cabin, standing alone at the end of the road. The lawyer had sent me the key. I was the sole heir. Inside, the house was dark and smelled strongly of mildew. I opened the window and turned on the light to clearly see the small living room, with an old armchair, a dusty wooden table, and face-down picture frames on a shelf. I turned one over. It was a young man, probably a high school student. Written on the back of the photo was a handwritten line, "David Summer, 1985. This was my dad when he was young. Next to it was another picture, a group photo of a high school class on graduation day. I also flipped the back and was curious about the handwritten line, "Marcus, I'm sorry." I started walking around. There wasn't much furniture. My father lived a minimalist, almost ascetic life. The bedroom was empty, with just a bed and a desk. The closet had a few very old clothes. On the desk, I found a dark brown leather journal, its page corners curled and yellowed. I opened the first page. The handwriting was messy. March 14th, 1998. I saw it again. Last night it stood in the corner of the room, and its face was not intact. Its mouth was wide open like it was screaming, but there was no sound. I can't sleep anymore. My hands were shaking. I flipped through the next pages. The lines were increasingly chaotic, the sentences fragmented, sometimes with very large capital letters. It still follows me. It has never gone away. I sat down on the floor and kept reading. The next pages were all ramblings about a spirit that appeared every night. My father described it in detail. It's about 5 feet tall, gaunt, with grayish skin. Its face is smashed in, with dried blood on its cheek, but I still recognize it because of those eyes. It's Marcus. I mumbled the name to myself and remembered it was written on the back of the photo. I quickly flipped through the pages, my heart pounding. About halfway through the journal, the tone suddenly changed. The writing was slower, seemingly more composed. June 22nd, 1998. I have to write it down. I have to face the truth. Marcus Hoffman. We went to the same high school in Eugene. Marcus was always the weak kid, easy to bully. And I did it. Me and my friends pushed him into lockers. We poured milk over his head in the cafeteria. We mocked him in front of the whole class. I was the one who started everything. We chased Marcus behind the school shed. I pushed him, and his head hit the step. He was bleeding a lot. We panicked and ran away. The next morning, we heard Marcus died at the hospital. The cause was a brain hemorrhage. I shook uncontrollably. I couldn't focus on any lectures that whole day. No one knew we were there. Marcus probably didn't get a chance to say anything. His family thought it was an accident and didn't ask for an investigation. Reading this, my heart was pounding hard. My hands were shaking so much, I could barely hold the journal. I looked around the dark room, suddenly feeling the air was heavy. I swallowed and read on. September 12th, 1998. It was my birthday. That day, Emily gave birth to a baby girl. We had agreed to name her Maddie. Waiting outside the delivery room, I felt like I was on fire. Until the doctor carried the baby out and loudly called out the family's name, I burst into tears. But the terrible thing is, I saw Marcus again. I saw his spirit in its most distorted and horrific state, but his eyes never changed. That look of pain, of despair, stared straight at me, then slowly turned to look at Maddie, who was still red. Then he entered her. I screamed in helplessness, and at that moment, I understood the despair Marcus felt. Desperate watching him merge into my daughter, just like he was desperate watching us leave when he was in the most pain. When Emily gave the baby to me to hold, I saw my daughter's tiny hand suddenly deform, turning into the grayish, ice-cold hand of a corpse. I was so scared, I dropped the baby onto the bed. Emily screamed in shock. I couldn't explain to my wife that Marcus had come. He took revenge by possessing my daughter's body. Tears fell onto the page. I didn't realize I was crying. I kept reading, even though I knew the truth being revealed would cause me great sorrow. I can't be near my child. Every time I see Maddie, I see Marcus in her. I see his smashed-in face on my daughter's face. I hear our mocking laughter and her cries. Emily doesn't understand. She thinks I'm going crazy. Maybe she's right. I have to leave. The last page, which my father wrote 3 weeks before I read this journal. Maddie is grown now. I sometimes secretly look at her pictures online through Emily's account. She's beautiful, like her mother. I'm happy to be able to see her normally and not see Marcus in her anymore. Marcus was never in Maddie. Marcus was only in me. I killed him. I destroyed my family. And now I'm alone with the ghost I created myself. I closed the journal, clutching it tight to my chest. Tears streamed down my face. The room was still dark and cold, but I no longer found it scary. I only found it lonely. A man who lived for over 20 years with ghosts in his head, unable to forgive himself and unable to live in happiness. My father didn't abandon me. He was a broken man, consumed by guilt every day. It was all sickness, hallucinations born from a tormented conscience. But to him, they were more real than anything. I imagined him quietly scrolling through my photos online, silently saving every moment without once daring to click like. A father who couldn't hold his child, couldn't call her name, could only watch from afar like a shadow, because inside him, Marcus had never died. I grieved for the father I never got to meet. I understood he had imprisoned himself in an invisible jail all his life and died in solitude.